Hi, in this video I just wanted to go over setting up your Resident Evil 4. I'll be doing the Steam version, and I'll show you how to either add ENB and SweetFX or Reshade and SweetFX. Both actually have the same setting files, so the effects are basically the same between the two. However, the Reshade does have a newer SweetFX, so it does have additional effects that can be enabled in the settings file. And as well, if the ENB or the Reshade doesn't work for you, then you can try either or as an alternative. And I'll just go through how to actually set up your game. I'll also go over adding mouse support for in-game play to kind of give you a bit better gameplay compared to the kind of clunky controls that come with the default game. So I'll start off with the ENB and SweetFX. The first thing you want to actually do is open your game folder, and you can do this if you're on Steam by just right-clicking on the game in the library, selecting Properties, Local Files, and Browse Local Files. If you're using a different version, then you'd go through the C drive and you would go to the game's location. And so it would be wherever it's located on your drive here. If you were using another version, if you're using the Steam version and you manually go to the location, it's C program files, Steam, Steam apps, Common, and Resident Evil 4. And once you're here, you'll want to download the mod. So you would download it here, and I'll put a link in the description for the mod locations. Now once you've downloaded it, as I've done here, I have it on my desktop. Normally it will go to downloads or wherever you download to. Just open it up from that location using WinRAR or 7-zip, whatever zip program you're using. And once you've opened it here, you just want to take these files here and you want to place them in the Resident Evil 4 folder here. And then you want to take the 4 gigabyte patch and the D3, D9, DLL, and you want to move those into the bin 32 folder. And once you've done that, first you want to run the 4 gigabyte patch right here, and just say yes and select the game file here, and you just want to say OK. If it happens to have a different address here, just copy the folder address here and then paste that in and press enter, and it will take you to the same folder. And then you want to apply it to the Bio4 exe, and you'll get a successful screen, and it will back up the file for you right there. So if there's any problem, all you have to do is remove this one and then change the name back to Bio4 exe on the backup to restore it to the default. At this point, you want to start your game and make sure that it's running properly for you. And when you get into game, there are a few things that you should do in order for the effects to work properly. And the main thing being, you want to go into your video settings and you want to turn off the anti-aliasing. If that's on and you have to turn it off, then after turning it off and saying OK, then exit your game and restart your game in order for the effects to start properly. With this on, that does disable them, so you have to run it with that off. I'll just go over what it does. It actually just removes, it's basically set up as a color match, enabling various AA settings, other settings, including HDR settings to make the game run and look nicer without changing the actual effects of the game, so that you still get that original gameplay experience, but in a much higher definition and better looking game. And as you can see, when you're playing, you probably don't really even notice that there's this kind of gray haze on the game, and it takes that away completely and really sharpens up the colors. And as you can see here, the one side is kind of foggy gray, whereas the other side, the colors seem to come right out. And then here on the full screen, you can see that the detail is still there. You can still see all the detail, but the actual colorations are their natural colors without that filmy look over them. And you'll find, basically, if you have any add-ons or anything, texture packs that you put onto it, that this will apply itself to those also. And when using this, it also helps if you're an NVIDIA or an ATI user to set up the DSR and VSR virtual resolutions in order to run your game in 4K resolutions. I usually use the 2100 setting or the 2560 setting on my 1920 for the finest pictures. But you can alter that if you have a 4K monitor, you want to run it in 4K, then set it in that way and you should be fine. There are a few things that you may want to just make sure when you're running the game, that if you are using the DSR or VSR, that you make one change. You want to open the ENB series I in the Resident Evil folder and change under its global settings, allow anti-aliasing 120. This will just make sure that your game won't suffer from any jitters or lags or anything like that. As well, the 4 gigabyte patch should make sure that the game loads and runs a lot smoother for you. And basically, that's just a matter of going here and then opening this file and changing that one line there, the allow anti-alias. Right here, you would change that to 0. You can leave it at 1. By default, I run it at 1, and actually with the 4 gigabyte LAA patch, it doesn't seem to have any problems for me, and I am running in the DSR. So consider that kind of an optional. If you do have any issues in game, then by all means make that change, and it should make the game run smoothly for you if you do have any issues. And one other thing, if you start the game and you have like a blank screen or the graphics are off in any way, then what you want to do is switch out the D3, D9 in the bin32 folder with one of the alternate 4 here. I generally use the Black Mesa as an alternate for myself. I use an NVIDIA 960 GTX, so that usually works for most of the NVIDIA cards, as well as the ATI. If you do have issues with that, then of course you can use any one of these here, and it's just a matter of copying this here, and then you want to paste that back in the bin32 folder here over top of this one, and then start the game. Make sure everything's running. If it's running properly, then that should be fine. and you shouldn't have to make any other changes. Now, to uninstall it, as I said, for uninstalling the 4 GB patch, just delete the modified Bio4exe and rename this to Bio4exe. Take the .backup off, and that will return the game to its standard launcher. And then as well, for the ENB, you just want to delete this file here, and then you want to take the SweetFX, the Alt D3D9 folder, as well as these files here, and you would just delete that, and that's how you would return your game to normal if you decided you didn't want to use the ENB and SweetFX. Now, if you weren't able to get it running for whatever reason using the ENB and SweetFX, you can also use the Reshade and SweetFX. It also comes with the 4 GB patch, which can be applied in the same way to the game exe in the bin32 folder. However, in this case, you place the files differently, and what you want to do is the same thing to open the folder as I showed you, but in this case you would actually take the Reshade and SweetFX files, and it would all go into the bin32 folder here. And we'll just, so you would have that, and then again you would run the 4 GB patch and apply it to the Bio4exe, and then you would just start the game. Now this one here does run with in-game AA, and the settings actually will allow you to set it right up to 8 times. And it will also run with the DSR and the VSR, enhancing it, and it does the same thing. It kind of removes that filmy kind of gray color over the game, bringing out the natural colors and making it look a lot sharper, and you're able to make out a lot more detail without really much difference in the actual coloring. It's basically moving your game from a lower definition into an HDR style definition. This one does support a lot more features because it is a newer SweetFX, so you can actually go into the settings file and enable things like film grain and other things like that if you wanted to customize it on your own. Now, there is some requirements for both the ENB and SweetFX. They do require that you have the final release of DX9. If you don't, just download it through the link there, install the files, and then run the file as directed here. As well, if you're an NVIDIA user and you find that you can't get the ENB working through any of the D3D9s, then you can use this mod here, and what you do is rename the D3D9 that came with this mod to this name, D3D9 Orig, and you take the one that comes with this mod and add it to the other files, and it will work together. Now, there is an installer version in which you can download and run. Just follow the instructions and set it to D3D9 when it's finished, and then you would just take the settings file from the Reshade and SweetFX, this mod here, and overwrite the one that was generated by the installer version, and that will update the settings. If you choose to use Reshade version 3 or newer, that one's a little different, where you have to create the settings file in-game through the Reshade, and then you have to find the settings file and transfer the settings from this into that settings file by just changing the appropriate lines and such. And that's how you would get them over. Although the ENB and the Reshade both do have the same settings, so the settings file or the preset file can be moved around between different versions if you choose to do so. Now that's basically it as far as the setup. In addition, there are some additional setups, such as setting up your mouse so that you have kind of left and right movements with your mouse so that you can move around properly without having to use all keyboard keys. And you just have to follow the steps here in the Steam guide, and that will allow you to add those extra control functions to your game. It's actually a lot nicer to play when you have those additional mouse functions, which, unless you have a controller, you're really stuck with the keyboard, and that's kind of really clunky and hard to get around when you're playing it that way. Now, as far as the rest of the setup, any additional notes, questions, answers can be found through the same links. Basically, the notes are almost identical between the two. With the Reshade, just check the contained documentation for your various hotkeys and such. Print screen will work with both of them. You'll find your generated screen images in the bin32 folder. So if you want to make a shortcut to that folder so that you can access those screenshots, just make one on your desktop or wherever, and that way you can get at those screenshots fairly quickly and then use whichever program you would normally use in order to convert them over for whatever you're going to use them for. Now that just about covers everything between the two, and I will make sure to put links on the bottom of this video. I'll also do a gameplay video just to kind of show you how the game should look and how it will run once it has all the patch and setup and such. And again, Reshade and SweetFX anti-aliasing is fine. ENB and SweetFX has to be off. If it's on and you start your game, you'll have to disable it and restart your game for the full effects to work. Just remember that. Alright, if there's any other questions, please let me know below, and otherwise, enjoy your game.